When German soldiers laid down their weapons in 1944 and 1945, most of them expected only one thing: a grim, uncertain future. Many believed they would be sent to brutal prison camps, forced into starvation labor, or kept behind barbed wire until the end of their days. But as soon as they crossed into American custody, something entirely unexpected began to unfold. German prisoners of war found themselves stepping into a world they had never imagined. One defined not by punishment, but by a level of industrial power, material abundance, and organized efficiency that shocked them to their core. And this shock only grew when thousands of them were placed on ships, transported across the Atlantic Ocean, and delivered straight into the heart of the United States itself. Nothing in Nazi Germany had prepared them for what they were about to witness. For years, the Nazi regime had fed its citizens a constant stream of propaganda describing America as weak, disorganized, racially divided, and morally decayed. German soldiers were taught that America relied entirely on machines and soft civilian workers who lacked discipline. They were told that the United States was incapable of producing enough weapons, vehicles, or equipment to sustain a real war. But the moment German POWs set foot onto an American port, this fiction began to collapse. What they witnessed: towering factories, endless railway networks, streams of trucks, columns of workers, and a vast organized system built for one purpose: producing victory, forced them to confront a truth far larger and more frightening than any battlefield defeat. For many German prisoners, their journey to the United States began immediately after capture. American guards would escort them to temporary camps in France or Belgium, where they would wait for transport. Most had never seen such a high level of organization before. Food was distributed on time, medical care was provided without discrimination, and even severely wounded German soldiers were treated with professionalism. To many, this felt surreal. They had spent years believing that only Germany possessed discipline and order. Only Germany knew how to organize a nation for war, and only Germany maintained a professional army. Yet here they were, being processed through an American logistical machine that ran more smoothly than anything they had seen back home. But this was only the beginning. Once enough prisoners were assembled, they were moved toward the Atlantic ports. The ships waiting for them were massive, far larger than the German transport vessels they were familiar with. Some were Liberty ships, simple, rugged cargo ships built in astonishing numbers by American shipyards. Others were troop ships refitted to carry hundreds or even thousands of POWs. As the Germans boarded, many marveled at the sheer size of the vessels. They had heard rumors that the Americans built ships in a matter of days, but most dismissed this as enemy exaggeration. Now, standing on the decks of these steel giants, they wondered if the rumors were true. How could a nation produce so many ships so quickly and so efficiently? The journey across the Atlantic was tense but strangely uneventful. German sailors among the POWs knew how dangerous the Atlantic had been earlier in the war. U-boats once stalked these waters, sinking countless Allied ships. But by 1945, the tables had turned completely. The Atlantic crossing was safe, uninterrupted, and protected by overwhelming American naval strength. To many German POWs, this alone was shocking. America had dominated the seas so completely that their own navy could no longer threaten it. The prisoners were fed decent meals, allowed on deck for fresh air, and given medical attention if needed. Some were even surprised to see American sailors joking, laughing, and relaxed, far different from the tense, exhausted German crews they had served with. But none of this compared to the shock that awaited them when their ships finally approached American shores. As the coast appeared over the horizon, many prisoners found themselves speechless. Towering cranes, sprawling docks, vast warehouses, and endless rail lines stretched as far as the eye could see. Massive cargo ships, tankers, and naval vessels moved in and out of port like parts of a living machine. The ports were louder, busier, and more modern than anything they had ever witnessed in Europe. Some POWs later recalled feeling as if they had arrived in the future, an industrial world decades ahead of Germany. When German POWs disembarked, they were greeted not with hostility, but with well-organized American military procedures. Papers were checked, belongings were recorded, and prisoners were loaded onto buses or trains with efficiency that left many astonished. Unlike in Germany, where wartime shortages had crippled transportation, American locomotives and vehicles were abundant. Trains were powerful, fast, and modern. The sight of dozens of locomotives waiting on parallel tracks was almost unbelievable for men who had seen their country's railways bombed into ruin. As the trains carried them deeper into the American mainland, German POWs experienced another shock: the sheer scale of the United States. Town after town, city after city rolled past their windows. Cars filled the highways, businesses flourished, homes looked comfortable and intact, and the landscape seemed endless. German soldiers had spent years enduring hunger, rationing, and fear. Yet here, civilians lived as if the war barely touched them. Streets were full of people, shops were open, and factories ran at full power. For many POWs, this was the moment they realized the true industrial difference between the two nations. Germany had poured every resource it had into the war and still could not compete. America, meanwhile, was fighting a global conflict and still had enough abundance to live comfortably at home. The prisoners eventually arrived at one of the many POW camps scattered across the United States. These camps were not the brutal labor prisons they expected. Instead, they were orderly, clean, and regulated by the Geneva Convention. Barracks were simple but well built. Food was plain but adequate. Medical care was provided. Some camps even had sports fields, libraries, and classrooms. American guards treated the prisoners firmly but fairly. Many Germans were stunned to learn that they would be paid for their labor inside the camp. They could earn small wages, buy items from camp stores, and even send money home. This level of humane treatment contradicted everything they had been told. But the greatest shock was still coming: the true scale of American industrial power. Soon after arriving, German POWs working outside the camps began to interact with American industry firsthand. Some were assigned to farms where they operated modern tractors and machines far more advanced than those used in Germany. Others were assigned to lumber mills, food processing plants, or local factories. What stunned them most was the abundance of equipment. Tools were not scarce, materials were not rationed, machines were not worn down from years of war. Everything was efficient, plentiful, and technologically advanced. Many POWs would later write in memoirs that they could not believe how wealthy and productive the average American community was. Even small towns had manufacturing plants larger than some of Germany's major industrial sites. Cars were everywhere. Construction never stopped. Factories ran day and night, and the workers, ordinary civilians, produced at a pace and scale German soldiers had never seen. No propaganda could hide this reality anymore. The United States had an industrial machine so vast that Germany never stood a chance. For many German prisoners, this realization was deeply personal. They began comparing their own wartime experiences with what they were seeing now. In Germany, factories had been bombed relentlessly. Transportation networks had collapsed. Civilians endured severe shortages. Workers were exhausted. But in America, industrial life continued at full power, as if the war were happening on another planet. The contrast was shocking. It challenged every belief they had been raised with: beliefs about German superiority, American weakness, and the nature of modern warfare. Some German POWs admitted that they felt embarrassed. They had looked down on America for years. Now they saw that the United States had become the most powerful industrial nation in history, capable of producing ships, planes, tanks, weapons, and supplies in quantities that Germany could never match. The war had been decided not only on the battlefield, but in the factory. And in that arena, America had been unbeatable. Even inside the camp, German prisoners continued to encounter this industrial efficiency. Food was delivered in massive quantities, transported by long supply chains that operated without failure. New equipment was constantly being brought in. Barracks were repaired with ease. Medical supplies were endless. Everything worked, everything arrived on time, and everything was built to last. Many POWs later described this as their first real understanding of what industrial might truly meant. As months passed, the prisoners began noticing something else. Americans seemed almost casual about their power. They did not boast. They did not try to intimidate. They simply did what needed to be done, and the system worked. This calm confidence unsettled the prisoners more than any weapon. Germany had relied on national pride, slogans, and propaganda to motivate its people. America relied on production, efficiency, and overwhelming capability. And it worked. For some POWs, this experience changed them permanently. They began questioning their own wartime beliefs, their government's decisions, and the ideology they had been taught. How had Germany expected to defeat a nation that could outproduce the entire Axis combined? How had they believed that America was weak when its factories could build more aircraft in a single month than Germany could build in an entire year? The contrast was undeniable, and the prisoners felt it every day. By the time 1945 turned into 1946, many German POWs understood something they would never have believed earlier. America had won the war long before Berlin fell. The United States had the industry, the manpower, the technology, and the resources to fight indefinitely. The prisoners living inside this industrial giant saw the truth with their own eyes, and that truth would stay with them long after they returned home. As German POWs settled into the rhythm of daily life inside the United States, their sense of awe only grew stronger. Many of them had imagined that captivity would mean harsh treatment, starvation, or brutal punishment, because that was what they had seen or heard on the Eastern Front. But the reality in America was entirely different. They were given structured routines, clean barracks, and food portions that many freely admitted were better than what they received in the Wehrmacht during the final years of the war. Some POWs later recalled moments of disbelief when they were served meals containing meat, fresh bread, butter, and even desserts. Such rations had become luxuries back home in Germany, where citizens were surviving on limited, rationed supplies. The contrast between a struggling Germany and a thriving, overflowing America became difficult to ignore. Work programs provided another eye-opening experience. German prisoners assigned to farms, factories, and forestry projects were paid modest wages, something completely unimaginable under Nazi ideology. They worked alongside American civilians who treated them not as monsters, but simply as men caught on the other side of a vast war. This human interaction shattered years of propaganda and reshaped their understanding of the United States and its people. For many German POWs, one of the most astonishing aspects was America's sense of personal freedom. They witnessed civilians speaking openly about politics, criticizing government decisions, and discussing war strategies without fear. In Germany, such conversations could lead to immediate arrest by the Gestapo. Even as prisoners, they sensed that American society operated on a level of openness and stability that felt unfamiliar, yet deeply impressive. Some camps organized concerts, educational classes, English courses, and even recreational sports. German officers who had lived through the strict discipline of Nazi military culture were stunned to see guards casually interacting with prisoners and allowing them structured autonomy. This treatment did not weaken discipline, it strengthened respect. Many POWs admitted that they felt compelled to follow rules because they were treated with dignity. As groups of prisoners were transported across states, from the Midwest to the South, from California to Texas, they passed through towns that appeared untouched by war. Factories hummed with a level of productivity they had never imagined possible. New houses were being built. Cars filled the roads. Shops carried goods that had been stripped from German shelves years earlier. It reinforced a single, overwhelming truth. America's homeland had not suffered destruction, and its industrial capacity had grown stronger with every passing year of the conflict. Even discussions among POWs reflected this revelation. Some whispered that Germany had never truly understood what it was up against. Others admitted that the war had been lost long before they were captured, because the United States simply had too much manpower, too much industry, and too much stability to be defeated. Perhaps the most surprising emotional shift came when many German prisoners began to feel safer in American camps than they had back home. Letters from Germany described bombed cities, food shortages, and families struggling to survive. While they longed for home, they also recognized that their immediate living conditions were more secure in captivity. American communities played a role too. Many civilians treated prisoners with unexpected kindness, offering food, small gifts, or simple conversations. Some POWs even returned to the United States after the war to reunite with people they had met during captivity. Others immigrated permanently, seeking the same stability and opportunity they had witnessed firsthand. When the war finally ended in Europe, the German prisoners were prepared for repatriation. But the return journey was filled with mixed emotions. Relief to see their homeland again, but uncertainty about what awaited them. Their years in the United States had shown them a world powered by industry, freedom, and abundance, and many feared what they would find in a devastated post-war Germany. Upon arriving home, their shock was immediate. Cities lay in ruins, factories were rubble, supplies were scarce. The contrast between the vibrant American landscape they had left and the shattered German homeland they returned to was impossible to ignore. Many spoke openly of America's industrial might, of how its vast production lines, endless resources, and stable society had made victory inevitable. Their testimonies shaped post-war German understanding of the United States. Instead of the monstrous image painted by Nazi propaganda, they described a nation of workers, machines, opportunity, and overwhelming strength. For thousands of former German POWs, their time in America became a defining chapter of their lives, a chapter that revealed just how powerful industrial capacity and democratic stability could be. And long after the war ended, when many of them started new families, careers, and futures, they still spoke with astonishment about the moment they first set foot in the United States. That moment when they realized that Germany had never stood a chance against the incredible industrial engine of America. That moment when the reality of America's strength, its factories, its farms, its cities, its people, became undeniable. Their experiences served as living proof that victory in war is not determined by ideology or ambition alone, but by the overwhelming force of a nation capable of producing more, building more, and sustaining more than its enemies ever imagined. For the German POWs who witnessed it firsthand, America's industrial might wasn't just impressive, it was unforgettable.